everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
So today we got a new game from Board and Dice called Books of Time, and yet weirdly this has no dice in it and only a tiny board, so maybe it's time to start changing the publisher name. But this is not like in their T series of games which they've done for ages. This is something different, something on its own, and that was enough to intrigue me at first. I mean, the cover is nice and colourful, and the idea that this is a deck builder with a twist, again, I like games when they throw a little twist in the measure, but I'm also curious to see whether this is a change of, a change of path, a change of tone from what normally Board and Dice have produced, because it's no secret that in recent months and years I've not kind of gone mad for some of their new games that they've released. I only gave like 5 and 6 out of 10s, I believe, for things like tableau and Origins First Builders and Terracotta Army. So I wanted to dive into this to see if it was something a little bit new and a little bit different. So what you're doing here is you are sort of deck building, but not quite. It's more book building. It is an engine builder game, so it is all about get the most victory points, and it's dry as a bone. There is no theme in here whatsoever. It's all just do weird shenanigans for victory points. But the idea with this is that you have got 3 of these books in front of you, red, yellow and green, and they've got a couple of starter pages in them to begin with. But what you're doing during the game is you are effectively adding pages to these books. The books have got special effects that you resolve from left to right as if you were reading a book. But during the game, you're able to sort of go, right, okay, from a particular offer of cards, so very much like a display that you can pick from, I fancy this card. It might have the icon you really like, it might have a cool ability you like, but when you get a chance to write it in your book, slot it in, close it up, and now suddenly you have a slightly different arrangement of abilities that you could do. I've got the same left page, but now I've got a different right page, and once I use the abilities, turn the page, and now suddenly you've got some different abilities on the back in there. This is essentially the fundamental gist of this game, building up these 3 books in such a way that you can create cool combos and do a really good engine build. But essentially during the game you get to perform an action, but you only have so many actions in the game. I forget the exact amount. I think it's something like 15, 16 odd rounds that you get in the whole game. But the idea is that it's all about action efficiency. So you can activate pages that are in your book. You can write new pages from your offer row, which dictates this basically dictates the cost of the particular actions, like how many pens and paper they cost. So this allows you to write pages in your book, in which case you get little bonuses. You can draw pages from the offer to put in your row. You can turn pages to activate little lesser bonuses, or you can just close the book, go back to the start and, start afresh. These actions all kind of, semi-relate to each other and they're all quite similar. But what you've also got is that you've got this board here where you level up these 3 tracks that are all color-coded to the corresponding books. And as you level up them, you'll gain various ways to score points. You'll be able to, level up them faster perhaps, or maybe they'll get you some bonus resources. Either way, these are essentially, ways to score more points. But in addition to that, you've also got some objective tiles, of which there are yellow, green, and red varieties. One of them wants different icons in the book. One of them wants the same duplicate icons and stuff like that. Yellow, in particular, here wants a particular sequence of icons in the book. So in this yellow book here, I have to, with this particular setting, if I want the most points, I got to get myself a boat, a cart, a camel, another boat, and a camel in sequence in this book while I'm adding pages to it. Not easy, but they're worth more points than the other 3 objectives. So with all that said and done, it's basically a dry engine builder with ways to get points. And that might sound like every single other game that you've ever seen with this concept. And I'm not gonna lie, it is pretty much like that. However, the whole gimmick with these, does it work? Answer? For me, yes, it does. This is a really cool twist on a deck builder, and I like deck builders already, so this was already kind of appealing to me from a mechanic standpoint. But this isn't the same as a deck builder where you have a bunch of cards and then you go, here's my deck, draw a bunch, and then I'll add a bunch into my discard pile and then shuffle it up, and there I go. That's not how this one works. You have to be, it's almost like there's a spatial awareness element to it. It's not enough just to load up your book with a bunch of really good cards by itself, because you can only activate so much at a time. And if you do load up about, like, say, 4 pages in this red book, you're going to have to activate like 1, and 2, 3 and 4. You're going to have to activate this multiple times in order to get to those later pages. And you've only got so many rounds in the game that might be too slow for you, unless you have a way of turning the pages a little bit quicker. But the idea is that you're not just concerned with grabbing cool cards or with the symbols that you want, you're also concerned about the order you put them in, and that adds a new scope of depth to a genre that has already been done to death, even though I love it to bits, but again, it's the new twist. Now, component-wise, very good actually. I mean, the cards are a little bit on the flimsy side and they're all bullet punch, so sleeving these is not an option. You have to keep these unsleeved, but I don't think it's really going to cause too much of a problem. I mean, they have yet to scuff in the plays I've had. As long as you're careful with them, you shouldn't be ripping these apart. As I mean, unless you are literally tearing these things apart to try and get them in the books, in which case maybe stay away from books, because frankly you're a little heavy-handed. But these things are fine, and these are just basic wooden tokens. This is just a 2-part wooden board. The main thing though are these 3 binders, and bearing in mind you get 3 of these per player, plus this Chronicles one, which we'll get to in a minute. These are good quality. I mean, it may seem like they're flapping around at the moment, but that's just because it gives a lot of space and they're empty. But when you put a bunch of cards in here, they still work fine. None of them are broken. They're easy enough. They're quite sturdy. I mean, if I want to open this up, doesn't take that much effort, as long as you just take the 2 ends and pull. And then when I want to close it, easy. I can close and open these all day and they have not been breaking on me. This is just a really cool thing. And given that the price point for this game is not that high compared to some heavy Euros out there, the fact that they are able to make these either says that this is a cheaper component than I thought it was, or they're just doing a really good job for the money on that one. These are really cool. I do like them. Now, the Chronicles board is basically a unique card effect that everybody can use each turn. So it dictates the timer for the game. These are shuffled at random. You put so many in the book, and basically every round you flip the page, and then there's a couple of abilities of which players can pick one of the 2 for that round only to use. This is a double-edged sword though, because on the one hand it is cool to have a unique set of abilities that that appear during the game in a different order every time. That in itself is cool. But there's a couple of issues that arise from it. Firstly, this flips at the start of the round, which means that player 1 has to look at the bonus and figure out what they're doing with it pretty much instantly, whereas everybody else gets to plan ahead for it. So the AP potential from the person who's in the first position is pretty high, and it's a little bit unfair on that because they don't get to look at a future page, which would have been quite cool. But the other problem with these is that they are also random as to when they come out, which means it's also random as to whether you actually can use these things. And if you can use these to their full effect, you have a significant advantage to someone who doesn't. But it's not because of bad play that you're unable to use these things. I mean, this one says, if I ditch a red page from my offer, I get a point and a paper. Well, that might be really useful for somebody. Oh, I just don't happen to have a red page in my offer right now. Okay, another one says that if you happen to have a red and a green in your display at that time, then you can get this bonus. Well, I've been concentrating on yellow. I don't have red and green stuff, so I guess I won't use that. No, but you're using it. Oh, fantastic. And then there's just other opportunities like that, where it's like discard something to get something. And you can say, well, why don't you prepare for it? But you can only prepare so much. All right, fine. I'm going to have a bucket load of pens in case a page comes up that says get rid of pens to get 5 points. I don't know if they're in the book. I don't know if they're going to turn up. How long do I hang on to these pens for before I should really use them on other actions? It's just, it doesn't kill the game, but I have had games where I feel like the winning player has done better with these than somebody who hasn't. It is definitely an advantage to take advantage of these cards, and there are just times when you feel like you can't, and that feels a little bit frustrating when that happens. The boards themselves, unfortunately, there's not much. I mean, this kind of goes for the game in general. There's not a huge amount of variety. The replay value is going to be a little questionable outside of the fun of creating all these cool combos, because these are pretty much all the cards you get, and they're fixed. There's no real variety in those. And this board never changes. It's just the logo on the back. There's no player scaling for it. There's no, particular setup. You can't tweak these boards. I mean, that would have been cool if you could have maybe put on tiles to tweak the point tracks. but they're going to be the same every game, and they do the exact same thing for everybody. So these are kind of like, if you're not going to gun for points from these objective tiles, you try to get them from here because they kind of contrast with each other. But it would be nice if this had a little bit of variety, and this is literally just, you know, have you got particular icons, whether diversification or duplication, get points. And if you level up to the top, you could get points for focusing on a specific color. But again, it's cool, you can have different paths to victory, but these are your paths to victory. Like, there's not much that's gonna generate that's new from game to game. Now, it quotes 45 to 60 minutes on the box. Part of that is true. You want to play this solo, you could get this done in 45 minutes. The second part is a lie, because this is implying that from 1 to 4 players, this game only goes up by about 5 or so minutes per player. Wrong, no. Try doubling that. This is easily a game that, with a teach as well, you're gonna need to set aside a good couple of hours to play a game with 4 of you involved. 4 players can take its time because the game has a lot of AP potential. Not necessarily a knock on the game itself, but you have to realize that you've got 3 different books. You've got all these different powers and the Chronicle book. Sometimes you haven't seen that Chronicle book because you're in the first position, and all these other considerations. Resources are very tight, so you can't afford to mess up. And so the idea that you'd have 4 of you taking only 60 minutes to play this, like for 15, 16 rounds, it's not going to happen. It just isn't. Now, 45 to 60 minutes is perfectly doable, solo and 2 player. But I think you should consider that this is a 60-minute game with 1 to 2 players, 90 minutes with 3, 2 hours with 4. Maybe you could shave it fast if you just do not think about what it is you're doing with these books, but 60 minutes with 4 players with this is just frankly impossible. We've not come anywhere close to achieving that kind of time length.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
So that kind of just leaves solo mode, right? Well, that's where this game comes into its own, because I've mentioned that the gameplay is really good fun, alright? I really enjoy doing the book deck building part. I think that's brilliant. I like creating all these combos and trying to manage the tight resources, and the Chronicles book, it's a double-edged sword, there's good and bad, but overall it's good fun gameplay. So rather than playing this with other players, is the solo mode worth it? Thankfully, yes. The solo mode is very easy to pilot. In fact, it's mainly just like the multiplayer game, except you have these little objectives on these 3 tracks for red, yellow, and green that you select different tiers for each one, like a bottom tier for yellow, a middle tier for green, and a high tier for red, for example. And based on your difficulty level, you have to achieve so many of them, as well as get a minimum point threshold. All the AI does is simply nix cards from the offer that you might want based on its own priority. That's it. It doesn't score. You're trying to meet the minimum condition while also doing objectives. But if you up the difficulty to higher levels, and with certain of those upper tier objectives, you might also lose the game outright if the AI nicks cards of certain symbols too often. You know, it depends what objectives you go for. But it's a very easy solo mode. You know, there's no like points you've got to beat from an AI. It's get the minimum requirement and achieve this in order to win. I like that because it's not beat your own score. Beat your own score is boring. You know, oh yes, I got 100 points and I rank as master writer or whatever. I don't care. I like ones like this though, a bit like in Pursuit of Happiness, where you have specific objectives to achieve, and if you don't achieve them, you just lose. I couldn't care less if I got 80 points, 100 points, 200 points. Did I beat the scenario? Yay or nay, that's what this is. But because the AI doesn't take any time to do, it's literally just get rid of cards out of the offer, and it's really simple, you get to focus your entire 60 minutes of time it should take you to get through a solo mode on this. On these, on building the books, doing all the cool gameplay, Chronicles events, and everything. So you get the full experience of the game without the time length dragging on. So Books of Time really does depend on what you intend to do with the game. If you're planning to play this multiplayer, like 3 or 4 player on a regular basis, you might struggle with that time length, the idea that you are kind of just sitting around waiting for your turn. There's quite a decent bit of downtime. The multiplayer solitaire is there in spades, and the lack of variety is a hindrance because you're not going to see any real difference in the cards and that from game to game, and the board doesn't change. That sort of thing might put you off. But if you're planning to play this just solo and maybe 2 player max, this could be a game that I reckon you should go and give a look, because I do stipulate that this whole book building thing is cool. it is really cool. I really enjoy this aspect. It's a twist on a mechanic I already like, and therefore it was already going to appeal to me, but in trying it in practice, it is cool because you are thinking about, you know, not only what to put in your book, but also the spatial awareness aspect of it, particularly with the yellow books, and that in itself is really good fun, even if this game is dry as a desert. It's absolutely dry as a desert. The Chronicles book is a double-edged sword, as I mentioned, but it's still decent. You know, I still enjoy having those extra effects each turn. It's just, it's a little luck-based as to whether they work for you. But the solo mode being really easy to pilot means that I can crank this game out in a short amount of time, get a good in-depth Euro game experience with something that feels unique. And one thing I will definitely say about this is it feels like a welcome change of pace for Board and Dice. Board and Dice have been doing essentially the same kind of game for the last God knows how many years, and it's, for me personally, it's got a little bit of a downward spiral and a little bit stale at this point. I think we're done with the whole T-games thing. We're done with the whole let's put dice on various spaces and trigger actions. You know, games can do that, but I think we need a new approach. And this feels like a welcome change of pace. Is it an excellent game? No, there are some problems I have with it as mentioned, but I feel this is a step in the right direction. And it does feel like that's what they intend to do, like they're trying new things out. And if this is the first of their trying new things out approach, then I look forward to see what Board and Dice come up with in the future. You know, to see some new ideas, a little bit of innovation, more colour. More colour for a kickoff is already enough, you know. And with stuff like this, it makes me hopeful that in the future we're going to get like some real banger game from them. That's going to be different and interesting, and you know what? I'll be there to check it out. For this one though, it's still a good start, a very good start. But I've got to consider what mark to give it, and I think it does depend entirely on, as I said, who you intend to play it with. I'm going to give this one, from my perspective though, an 8 out of 10, a great rating. But this is purely because I'm only going to play this really for 1 and 2 players. And even then, I probably won't play it 2-player. This is basically a solo game for me, and as a solo game, I think it is a solid 8 out of 10. But it diminishes quite substantially when you go up the player counts to the point where, you know, you'll be touching base with 6 and 7 out of 10s at 4-player, just because of that sheer downtime and the length it takes. But I think if you want a solo Euro game that's got some cool combo building, a tweak on deck building, if this is the sort of thing you like, then grab this game because I think you're going to enjoy it. I really do. Just don't expect it to come out into group play anytime soon. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube, but also thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on that page. Check out all the other reviews I've been doing lately, but also let me know your comments down below. Have you actually not grown bored with all the T games that have come out? Is this something new you want to try? Have you played it? What are your thoughts? Do you only play it solo? Do you play it with 4 players? Particularly, what is your thoughts on the Chronicles book? That'd be interesting to know. But, you know, and do you feel like this is a good change of pace for Board and Dice? And, you know, do you look forward to some stuff coming out in the future? I mean, what have they got? They just, I think, released like Nightmare Cathedral from Kickstarter and that, and new Barcelona looks pretty cool. So, you know, let me know your thoughts. But of course, remember, regardless of how you choose to write your book, it's still only a game. Bye for now.